There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is your mountain. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Your Mountain podcast. You probably don't want to know this, but I'm still your host, David Wilms.
Well, you'd be tough to replace, Dave.
I don't know that I would.
Not me either. I just want to say
out there. You'd replace me, Nephi.
No, I would not. If you weren't here doing this, I literally would probably not do it anymore.
I don't know if that's a compliment.
No, that's the reality. I think Mike and I
we've seen the last Mike and Nephi episode just
disaster.
Tanked. And speaking of Mike,
maybe the rest of you should care more about how rules and regulations and laws are made.
You should. Everybody should care about that. They should also care about the way it's presented.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dave.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mentioned Mike. Mike's unfortunately not able to join us today.
Sorry, Mike.
Because Mike has a real job and he's working hard.
We all have real
jobs. He's working hard. He can't be with us. We are in Omaha, Nebraska. Where are we? What are we doing?
I don't have my cheat sheet anymore. We're at the North American Wildlife Conservation Conference, the 85th.
In Omaha, Nebraska. And I think we had 1,100 people register. I don't know how many people actually showed up because of some recent events going on here. Nationally, it's kind of cut into attendance a little bit, but it's still very well attended.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate today. So the thing, and I've mentioned this before because we re-recorded a number of these episodes at different conferences where we attend. And the beauty of these is, we like to think of ourselves as pretty knowledgeable on policy issues, but we get to talk to people that we aspire to be someday. Right? We get to talk to the people that know everything, that are giants in the industry that we should all be looking up to. And aspiring to be, and I believe we have one here with us today. And I'm not going to do justice to an introduction. Tony, would you introduce yourself, what you do?
Sure thing. I'm Tony Schoonen, and I am Chief of Staff of the Boone and Crockett Club. We're based in Missoula, Montana. The Boone and Crockett Club is the oldest conservation organization in the nation. Founded in 1887 by not president yet, but Theodore Roosevelt. And it was founded based on the fact that Roosevelt had been spending a lot of time out west, and he had seen the decimation of our wildlife. He'd seen the pillaging of our natural resources, specifically Yellowstone National Park. And he came back to New York City in December of 1887 and decided he wanted to have a party and a dinner with a few of his close colleagues that were people of influence at the time, people of influence in industry and education, science, and politics. And the purpose of that dinner was to discuss what he'd seen out west, and this was a problem for Theodore Roosevelt, and he wanted this group of individuals to help him identify a solution to that problem and a course correction and a path forward. And so that was the birth of Boone and Crockett. We, at that time, they set it up to have 100 regular members, and again, those were people of influence. Today, in 2020, we still have 100 regular members. They're still people of influence. And historically, when they started working, the first thing they tackled was the protection and expansion of Yellowstone National Park and the Yellowstone Preservation Act of 1894. And when Roosevelt became president in 1900, he, in his 2 terms, they enacted a whole lot of really good things for wildlife and wildlife management. They did away with market hunting. They incorporated game laws. They put responsibility for management of wildlife. They gave that to the states and the territories. They formed the National Forest Reserve, which later became the U.S. Forest Service, the National Refuge System, the National Park System. And so all these great things happened back in those early days. And about 20 years later, and this was after Roosevelt passed in 1919, the members of the club kind of wanted to figure out a way to measure their success. And so in the 1930s, they started what we know as the records program. And they started keeping track of mature male specimens coming out of ecosystems. And at the time, harvesting a mature male specimen in an ecosystem was an indicator that ecosystem was healthy. And so, as you fast forward to today, the records program is really the face of the club. That's what we're known for. We're the heads and horns guys. But as we started out as an organization and as we continue to carry on today, the bulk of our work is in policy. It's in education and demonstration and research. And those are really the key things that we are involved in that people don't really realize because, the records program is what we're known for. So, and by the way, the records program is not a contest. The records program was created for the exact reason I just stated. It's a scientifically based program that's used by wildlife managers all across the continent. And, if you have a problem, my whitetail are too small. This guy, the next state over has a good whitetail population, strong. What am I doing wrong here? So they call us up, they figure out what's a similar ecosystem, and then they start talking back and forth, and they identify some help, and so that's in a snapshot. A little bit of the history of the club, and then I guess who I am.
That's fascinating. I was going to ask because a lot of people think of the hunters as always out for selecting the biggest from and going and selecting, but really it was just a metric for you guys, right? It was like when this animal was taken, we can now measure this animal. We can just treat that as a statistical representation of the other types of animals we're likely to have out there. If we have this many of animal A, then that means we probably have this many of B as well. And you can just kind of run that down the line. And people now have just assumed it's something that it wasn't.
Exactly. And so, in the word trophy, that was a people have not investigated the meaning of that term and its history. Because the term trophy was these mature male specimens that I'm talking about. Your horn length.
He was the trophy.
Exactly.
The trophy buck.
And if you get a big critter coming out of an ecosystem, that's an indicator that ecosystem's healthy. Mm-hmm. So now the term trophy has been more or less diffused into something bad when originally it wasn't something bad. It was just a word to describe these mature animals that you take, and I think these are kinds of things that when you talk about, because another big cornerstone of our organization is obviously fair chase and hunting ethics. When you talk about trophies and you talk about trophy owners and you talk about the records book, and that's one little known fact is that record book is science based. There's not any. It's not like a hunting contest where big trophy guys are out there just blasting animals. That's not what it's all about.
You're missing the picture if that's what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think about it this way, so is it fair to say if we, let's take two herds, right? And say we're managing, we start to actively manage herd A for nothing but giant bucks with big racks. The problem with that then, right, is you lose the efficacy of the understanding of what the entire what an entire healthy herd looks like. If all you've got is 5 giant bucks, Fred, Ted, Dave, and Don, and that is like, and you grow those to bajillion, however big you want to grow them, they don't represent the health of a deer herd. They represent the health of Dave, Dad, whatever, right?
Right.
You're missing the point if that's your concept, because you're no longer talking about the original intent of the Boone and Crockett Club and what you guys did, which is like, hey, let's get a snapshot. Let's have a metric to measure to, a canary, if you will, in the coal mine of how good is our deer herd. Well, now you've got individuals that are artificially bigger than, they're not natural. It doesn't represent the natural herd.
Exactly. They don't. And, that's why when we take a head into the books, obviously it's got to be a free-ranging animal.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be able to wander from ecosystem to ecosystem, and so for the purpose of our records program, we don't take any animals that are taken behind enclosures.
Yep.
And because that's not part of the formula.
Yep.
And
so for a lot of people, a Boone and Crockett number, that's a purely natural animal.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I know, Nephi, you want to talk about fair chase and some of the elements of that. I want to ask one more question about the organization as a whole, and we're going to talk more about the organization, obviously, as we get into some of these other issues. But you mentioned there are you have 100 members, and that's consistent with the way it was set up. My understanding is there are also professional members now too.
Right.
And
so
how does that work?
So what happened as time went on, you had your 100 regular influential guys and gals. And, then they added another category of professional members. And the professional members we look at as the worker bees. I mean, they're the heads of agencies. They're the academics, professors in universities that do the research, that have contributed a substantial amount to conservation. And, the thing with both regular and professional members, they're very heavily vetted. You have to be sponsored. You then have to apply. And then you have to be voted on by the board of directors. And then in the case of a regular member, you actually have to be voted on by all the other regular members. So it's a very difficult process to get into, or organization to get into at that professional and regular member level, and it takes a certain caliber of person to be able to do that. But then you practically have to die to get out. So, there is some payback on the other end, I guess.
So you're saying there's a chance, though, there are people dying right now.
there is a chance.
No, I think what he did was he explained how difficult it was to get in.
Yeah.
So
that's what I'm saying.
It's very clear to us that there's no path.
Yeah, it's just as difficult to get out. So,
but don't even bother trying. To the two people on the microphone here, because there's no path.
And we do have a grassroots base, and our associates program, and they are great people. There's only about 4,000 of them, but these are hardcore hunting people. I mean, their household income is substantial. They they hunt 49 days a year. They own on the average of 2 homes. They're very committed to the sport, and we have retained. 50% of those people have been with us for more than 5 years, which is unheard of in terms of retention rate in a grassroots base of any nonprofit. So, we're small, but we are a small group of very committed people. And anybody can join the associate program for $35. But, they read our magazine cover to cover. We get great questions from them about ethics and fair chase, and, they stimulate a lot of thought. They're on our social media. And so that, we're not a huge organization, but we are, but we have a small group of very well-heeled, influential folks.
Do people ever call you pragmatist? I'm just curious because
they call me a lot of things.
No, I was just curious about this because Dave mentioned the fair chase thing, and I think that we are obviously, this is a policy podcast. We typically talk about policies and how policies affect land, water, and wildlife. And certainly within the fair chase world, for people that would, I don't know if people think you're extreme, but you're not.
No.
There are people out there that have, you guys are, really, you're the, what's the right word?
Standard bearer.
The standard bearer, yeah, but it's like the radical pragmatists now, and
the extreme center.
Yeah, but I bring that up because I really, you guys had a white paper that came out on a topic some people call it long range hunting or long range, and I don't know whether they don't know the right term for that. But what's funny is I know some one of the individuals who I really respect is one of the first guys who was, people saw him on TV, using a laser rangefinder and things like that, who loves your statement on it and steered me towards it when I was trying to, walk people through, wrapping their heads around how you talk about this. Can you describe that position and that issue?
Sure. The long range hunting, first of all, there's a lot of people out there that are extremely good at long range shooting. They're ex-snipers or what have you that, either have the training or have the practice that are extremely good. Where you start running into a problem is when a product is manufactured and all of a sudden, the part of the promotion behind that product is, oh, by the way, if you buy this particular product, you can, shoot an elk at 1,000 yards. Well, that training component and that experience doesn't exist in that case. And that is where it really comes down to why they bought the product in the first place, and the ethical question. And when it comes to fair chase and hunting ethics, it really is in the mind of the hunter. If you bought that product to make a more effective harvest, and maybe that animal's 400 yards away, why not try to get a few yards closer? If you bought that product just so you can kill an animal 1,000 yards, you might want to start looking in the mirror a little bit.
Yeah. So, two things. Number one, a gentleman friend of mine named Ryan Kleckner, he has a book. Everybody on Amazon, go get the Long Range Shooting Handbook by Ryan Kleckner. But Ryan Kleckner is a former ranger sniper, and we were out hunting elk. And Ryan and I were together, and I said, Ryan, I want your take on this. And Kleckner said, here's my take on it. He says, if the elk are more likely... If you're more worried about missing than you are about being discovered by the elk, go get closer. And I just love that.
Yeah,
because it just, it was like, why? And that kind of, to me, that's how I feel about it. At the same time, I'm of the mindset, I do competitive shooting, and I'm of the mindset that I want everyone to be out there absolutely trying to ring steel at 1,000 yards and being really, really good at it. And then getting within 10, because to me, like, it's having that ability to, having your skill set be so refined that you're eliminating your human error as much as possible from that equation, because at the end of the day, we're going to take an animal. And so we want to, why not eliminate some of those variables? Why not be as good as possible with all of our tools and all of our skill sets so that when, so that that's not it's not a guessing game anymore. That's kind of how I felt about it. And I really liked his statement. And I love your statement on it from Boone and Crockett Club. And it was, I think, spot on.
Yeah, well, we put a lot of time and effort into that. As a matter of fact, we worked with some long-range shooting guys like your friend, that are very experienced in long-range shooting. And I think your mindset's perfect, Nephi. You're looking at, blazing out there 1,000 yards, great, but getting in closer, That's all the right reasons for all the right things. Now, that is Tony's opinion. Again, ethics is really is in the mind of the hunter.
My opinion on so I don't really take an opinion on. I don't pick a yardage or anything. I completely agree with everything you've said. My personal values are when somebody's telling me the story and when I'm telling a story about an elk hunt. The part that I think is worthy of bragging the most is when somebody says, I shot this elk at 15 yards, or I shot this elk at 30 yards. And it might be perfectly fine. They might be like Nephi. He's a great shot, but I'm gonna razz him till the day he dies. Every time he says I shot an elk at 400 yards,
I'm gonna tease Dave because he can't even, because Dave's scope is so bad that it doesn't work. So he has to get within 10 yards. I'm like, please, just invest.
Nephi is perfect. He practices what he preaches. He's perfectly capable of making a very ethical shot at 400 yards. No problem. I think he's perfectly comfortable with that.
And if I could get it at 100, I'm taking it at 100
right.
every freaking time.
I know he will, but then for the bragging that I like to hear, it's just my personal preference. I love it when somebody says, not, I killed this elk at 400 yards. I'm like, you're a great shot. Great. I want to hear that you're a great hunter.
Yeah.
You're right. Exactly.
Where were you at? How did you find him? What were the situations?
Yeah.
How long did you wait? All those things. Because that's to me, that's improving your craft. And as hunters,
right.
like, that's the part I really like. I like improving the craft all the way around. I think that to me, that's something, and I'm not telling everybody they have to be like me or think like me, but I think that's something that I think we should all aspire to, is just improving at your craft. Don't be lazy about it. That's just a personal opinion. So.
Well, no, and you're right, Nephi. I mean, seriously, if you, in terms of, hunting versus killing, there's two different things there, right? Hunting is hunting. It's a craft, like you said. I mean, you want to be good at that. It's what our ancestors did for, however many hundreds of years, thousands of years. But, the killing thing is a different thing, and is hunting, killing. You can draw a pretty firm line there. What you can't draw a line behind is as you guys referenced, is if you purchased equipment that's going to make you a more effective hunter, that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't ever forget the craft part.
Yeah. Don't use it as I I think there's some technologies now, maybe we should talk about them, where that are literally trying, they're taking the skill out of it.
Exactly. Yep.
And interestingly enough, you mentioned, I know one of the people I believe that helped you write that statement, that helped Boone and Crockett, who is a gentleman who sells probably some of the most accurate hunting rifles in the world, and said, people don't shoot elk that far away. Just because I make a product that is capable of that, it'll hit steel that far away. That's just not how it should be done, because there's so much. In fact, he teaches schools where they try and get people out and they try and realize what I think everybody needs to know about their hunting, no matter what they're hunting with, whether it's a bow or a trad bow or a muzzleloader, is that there's an area where your skill set and the ethical capacity of the system go away. And you better have enough knowledge to understand when you no longer have the capacity, when the gear no longer has the capacity, and when you need to click the safety back on or put the arrow away, and just say, you know what? Not this year.
So just because you can shoot doesn't mean you should.
No,
shoot.
And unfortunately, that's the other part that it kind of frustrates me, is that I see, Dave's got a great story about a bull that he took several years ago, and pulling a bullet or two out of that bull from a previous year.
Oh wow!
And unfortunately, there are, and I don't think this represents the entirety of the community, but there are people who, when they see a big animal, there are members of our community who would just start throwing lead. Mm-hmm. And for me, gosh, it drives me nuts. It's unfathomable. It's unacceptable. The idea that, you wouldn't get that, you pulled I know it was a 243.
It was
because of the size.
Yep.
Really?
And to pull that out of a bull that size.
So I shot a 360. We're talking Boone and Crockett here. 360 and 1/8 inch bull that I killed 2 years ago, and the hunt itself wasn't the story on this bull. It was what happened after, when we skinned back the front shoulder and there's some bruising, and you dig just a little bit and pulled out a 243 slug from the front shoulder, the bullet from the front shoulder. That had been there. It had clearly been there for years. There's no scarring on the hide, nothing like that.
Drives me crazy.
And then, so that was the one. And then I had noticed that he was missing some teeth, and all of his teeth are really worn down. Really, really old bull, a bunch of arthritis in the hip. I don't know if this guy would have survived the winter, but that's not the point. I take it to a guy to boil it down for me, because I want to do a European mount of this bull. And he calls me up and says, "Come over here. I want you to see something." I said, "Okay." He said, "I kept the lower jaw. I boiled it down too, because this was fascinating to me." And he pulled it out, the lower jaw, and put the two together. And it had been, you could tell, he even said, I talked to a biologist friend about this, and to confirm this, and had been shot through the jaw, through the teeth, broken the teeth.
Wow.
So and then the bone had healed up, so it had been shot a number of years prior. So the theory I had, and maybe it was shot by two different people at two different times, but my theory is this bull was at the tail end of its life, and a couple years earlier it might have been a 400-inch class bull, and somebody saw this bull
and had to take a shot.
Just couldn't resist the temptation, and had a 243 and took a shot. And maybe the first shot, that bull was standing still, and he hit that bull in the shoulder, but he was too far away. And then that bull took off running, and he tried to lead it, and he shot it in the jaw. This is the theory I have.
Right.
And you start talking about the ethics of that decision, and how the situation presents
working
itself.
Beyond your capacity. Somebody was working well beyond their capacity to make that ethical kill. And that, to me, that's the danger of not going down the road of when people say, "Oh, why do you care about ballistics and all these things?" It's like, well, I want to make sure that my hunting and whoever is with me know dang well that my 6.5 Creedmoor, if you're talking about elk, it runs out of gas. and you better, and you need to know that. You haven't got some magical, laser gun that, can zap animals out of the middle of nowhere. And guess what? Your 300 Win Mag does the same thing, and your 338 Lapua does the same thing. And then and man, just know your limitations. A man's got to, what's that? I don't know what movie this is, but a man's got to know his limitations. You have to know your limitations, because guess what? That's better for all of us, because it's better for us as hunters, because people, when they see us exercising that restraint, that's good for us. And guess what? That's better for Dave. That's better for you. That's better for me, because next year, somebody's going to, that's a magnificent animal. Somebody deserves a good shot at that animal.
Absolutely. Well, if Dave's theory of that bull is true, then you're exactly right. That individual that shot at that bull was going well beyond his capacity or her capacity. And, to your point, Nephi, about, the fact that you should know your firearm, you should know your ballistics, because that's going to make a more effective kill. And that is hunting. And the thing in the big scheme of things that we can't forget as a hunting community is that, right now there's 75% of the non-hunting public, looks at us and they say hunting's fine, but it's got to be hunting. If you saw, the surveys that came out a few years back, as you start down that line, hunting for sustenance is right at the top of the list. That's where that 75% approve it. If you start going down and you start talking about trophy hunting, it drops like a rock, and so we as hunters have got to be responsible for policing our own ranks. We got to educate people. We got to make sure they understand what hunting is and what capacity is when it comes to hunting certain types of species, because, and that's our responsibility. That's on us. And yeah, you're going to have your occasional guy that goes running off the reservation, but at the same time, what can we do to reel those guys in? And I think a lot of that is podcasts like this. You're educating your listeners to educate other people that they may know that may have some kind of a challenge understanding what they should be doing in the field.
They maybe just haven't tried to wrap around their mind around it yet.
No, and they don't realize the damage that not only they're doing to themselves, but to the hunting image of the American hunter.
We talk frequently on this podcast about how, and maybe we can talk more about this too. I know you had some other things you want to talk about, but we talk frequently about how 5%, just under 5% of Americans actually hunt. And that 95% of them don't hunt. 75% of Americans support hunting, and it's that 75% of Americans, because less than 5% of us actually hunt. That's 75% of Americans that support what we're doing. We got to do everything we can to maintain that support.
Absolutely,
and we've got to be really sympathetic to their concerns, and to the image that we project and the way that we behave in the field, because ultimately we are the minority. They in a land like the United States, a democratic republic here, they're going to determine our future.
That exactly, and and they're not going to consider shooting a 400 class bull elk with a 243 hunting.
No,
exactly. And I should really quickly just clarify. Nephi knows this. It's not like I've got piles and piles of big bulls. This literally was the first bull that I had an opportunity to shoot that particular
luck
season.
Of the draw for Dave.
It's brown, it's down.
That's Dave's. He's not like Dave's not like I'm going to wait. No, he just has no. He does not have the capacity. He has no off switch. If he's got a tag and it qualifies, I
did that once. I told a buddy we were whitetail hunting, and I told you this yesterday.
Yeah.
I told a buddy, I'm like, we're out whitetail hunting. I said, I'm going to be patient. I'm going to wait. I've never shot a big whitetail. I'm going to wait. And this little dinker of a whitetail walks out. Boom. Like, that's the one I'm shooting. I took off after him. Like my buddies still tell that story. They're like, you have no willpower. It's brown, it's down.
Yeah. Well, I think, you mentioned Theodore Roosevelt and the conversation he was having in New York. And remember, I think we all need to remember the people that were around him, they probably didn't know as much about animals as he did. We got to be careful that we take those opportunities to educate the people that are around us, because if we don't take that opportunity to share the knowledge, the good and the bad, and there is good and bad in hunting. It's not, this is not it's not perfect. There's no, it's when we're out there, you're taking an animal, you're taking its life, you're making that choice, but you have to be able to talk about how you do that in a respectful way, and how that is, my wife, whoever might think it's funny. Like, if I could have one animal left on Earth that I'm going to give everything for and to protect, it's a bull elk. There's just something about them that speaks to me, and just seeing them.
Is that why you never shoot any? Sorry,
that was low.
Sorry, never shoot
that was low. But yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. And so they're like, well, why do you love to hunt them so much? Well, that's because, that's my thing. And
well, you talk about the original founders of the club. The one thing, they were diverse in every other aspects of their lives, but the one thing that knit them together was that they were all sportsmen. They were fair chase hunters. And that was the one common denominator that all those people had. And it remains pretty much the same today, because you got, members of our club on both sides of the aisle. They all do all kinds of different things. You've got, everything from attorneys to winemakers to, but they all are bound together.
You have any lobbyists?
That maybe a
I'm just
couple,
kidding.
2 or 3.
I'm just kidding.
but they all love to hunt. And, in hunting, going back to the 75%, one thing that we have done that, very few other, shall we say, recreational folks have done that enjoy the great outdoors, that have taken advantage of our outdoor heritage, is we've taxed ourselves, which goes to your policy point, right? So, Pittman Robertson, both of whom, by the way, were Boone and Crockett Club members, Dingle Johnson, the hunters and anglers of this country have paid the bill. Mm-hmm. We're the ones that have put the money, into things like the Land and Water Conservation Fund and run it through the Fish and Wildlife Service and, back into the states, and that was a federal excise tax. And we did it to ourselves. We said, we're going to do this because we need money to help sustain healthy and viable wildlife populations and the habitat upon which those populations need to thrive.
Yeah, Dave.
And then at the same time now, also a part of specifically the Pittman Robertson Act, they wrote, the guy that wrote that act was a guy by the name of Carl Schumacher, I think, Schumacher. He actually drafted that act. And he wrote in there the 19 words that license sales stay with the states. So now you're divvying that pot up a little bit, and the amount of hunters in a state buying hunting licenses, that's all state money.
Yep.
And it doesn't go to the general fund. It goes to the state wildlife agency. It's right in the law.
Yeah, it was the requirement that in order for the states to receive the money, the Pittman Robertson Fund money,
they'd have to put 25%.
Commit. Yeah, and they had to commit. Also, they had to commit that license dollars that were from the states that were sold in the states were going to go back to the Agency for Wildlife Management. That could not be siphoned off, because that was the problem at the time. There were legislators, as often is the case. You run into budget troubles. You just which fund can we rob to pay this bill?
Yep.
And the condition of being able to get that money, in addition to having some skin in the game, was the additional skin in the game of making sure that all that the hunting license dollars stayed with that wildlife agency.
Absolutely. I tell you, those folks back in those days, they were smart, and they could see down the road, and they had a vision. Our entire system of North American wildlife management is based on what those guys did back then. And we're trying to work today to make sure that system continues happy and healthy. We're trying to fund that system, the North American model. When you look at the amount of money that hunters and anglers put into that, it's pretty astounding. And I think that's another thing that 75% looks at. They say, you know what, these guys are out there. I mean, not all of them, but some of them do understand that, these guys are funding a whole lot of other outdoor recreation, people that enjoy the great outdoors. But you have not seen anybody else do that.
Yeah.
In fact, you've seen people specifically create organizations and hire lobbyists to oppose efforts
to not
to do
have
that.
to pay
exactly.
to pay in. Yeah,
Without
Dave and
naming names.
Yeah. So I did want to chat like a couple of other things that I think were interesting. Wyoming passed a bill. So talking back to the policy, last year Wyoming was pushing a pretty general bill through the legislature that was just that I said it wasn't general actually. It started out very pointed, and then they made it more general, so that empowering the Game and Fish Commission to regulate certain activities, and some of the things that they decided that they talked about being regulated, and they wanted to get out in front of were forward-looking infrared. Mm-hmm. And so they had forward-looking infrared. And so this year I think they have proposals for rules on forward-looking infrared, live game cameras. And Dave, what was the other one?
Weren't drones one of them?
That was last. Drones has been done, but
was that one? Then I don't remember the other one.
Mm-hmm. It'll come to me. But forward-looking infrared, the technology. For those who don't know about it, we're talking about. Are you very familiar with that yet?
I'm not.
We had a guy from the Army Marksmanship Unit come and was doing a shooting competition with him, and he was talking about the good forward-looking infrared. And I'm telling everybody this because I don't want you to be the guy that goes like, oh, I'm going to go buy that so I can use it in this way. But you're seeing it more now. There's like some small units that guys are using for game tracking and things like that, right? That so forward-looking infrared takes a part of the electromagnetic spectrum that we wouldn't normally be able to see with our eyes. So it's generated by heat, mm-hmm. and then makes it so that you have a camera or you have a binocular or monocular that then allows you to see that signature come through. And so you'll see him. People have seen him before.
Like out of the Predator.
Yeah, well, that's what it looks like. That's exactly what it looks like.
That's what you want to. There's the.
Yeah, it looks like the pictures that you see from Sicario, where it's like everybody's in white, mm-hmm. And the background's black. That's forward-looking infrared, and really
like
good
night vision goggles type stuff.
But night vision is the NVGs are
right.
They're not as good. Because NVGs they're actually amplifying a different spectrum.
You've unlocked the nerd in Nephi.
Yeah. So what this is doing
You're
is
get to your question.
Imagine being able to look into across a gulch into dark timber and being able to see every elk bedded down in that timber right now. That's what we're talking about
mm-hmm.
with forward-looking infrared, and that's how good it is. Like good forward-looking infrared is that good, and so that's a technology that not a lot of people. That we have to get out in front of.
Mm-hmm.
The end. So,
are there technologies you're watching or things that you're watching?
Yeah.
That
in fact, technology, and I talked to Nephi at when we were at the Western Governors deal here in December about this. But the technology realm is coming, and it's here, and it's going to keep coming, and it's going to keep being here. And we as an organization have got to figure out. How to deal with that. Now, some of these things are no-brainers. Drones, for example. Obviously, if you have a drone flying over a mountain, they're doing just exactly what this forward-seeing infrared thing is doing, right? You're spotting stuff from a drone. Well, live cameras are another good example. It's one thing to have to get up and go out and collect your, pictures off your camera on your little discs, but it's another thing to be sitting on your couch and say, watching a football game, and there goes big old whitetail buck, and I'm going to put the game on hold, run out and shoot the thing. These are the kind of things that we've got to, because again, ultimately we got to keep that 75% where they belong, and that is supporting hunting even if they don't hunt. And if they see us taking unfair advantage over animals using modern technology, we're going to have a serious problem really, really quick. And worse yet, if the anti-hunters ever sniff that out, we're going to be in a world of hurt. And, that the states are grappling with this. It's not just Wyoming. There's a lot of states out there that are grappling with this modern technology question and actually looking to the Club for Leadership, which is why we're taking it very, very seriously, because mm-hmm. it's kind of sprung on us a lot quicker than we thought. Technological advancements are just, they're coming every single year at the SHOT Show. You get to see more and more and more. And so, and it's a tough question, because, again, why are these people buying products? Are they buying them to make a more effective harvest? Or are they buying them just to kill an animal a whole lot easier?
Yeah. Well, you look at forward-looking infrared. If your goal is to control hog populations in areas where they are invasive and really destroying habitat for everything else, that's a great tool.
Absolutely,
that's something you want to have in your toolbox for doing that control. As soon as that tool shifts to that whitetail buck, now we've got. I would say we have a problem, and I know that's for those states and those commissions and those individuals who are dealing with that. But that is the Nephi Cole opinion. But that's my opinion. So game cameras was the other one, and live game cameras for the same concern. was that, this is giving individuals the ability to go out and do that, to go, as you said, to wait on the couch. Automatic guns that were, set by the computer. I mean, that exists in some places where guys are, trying to, push this idea that you can buy an animal someplace and then push the space bar on your computer and activate a trigger someplace to take the animal. That's out there. The last one, I remember what it was. It was selling GPS coordinates. And so it was.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Yep. And so it was basically find the buck, put that, you know where he beds down all the time, and then selling an individual those coordinates so that individual could just go out and take that buck. And that was the other one.
Is that something you've seen?
I've heard about that one.
Yeah.
And we have discussed that. And it's an interesting situation because, GPS can be so valuable. You've got the technology now to know exactly where you're at so you don't venture onto private land, to be able to not get lost. There's all these different kinds of apps. I think that is one technology that you can apply for very good reasons that can be abused.
Yep. If
you're not careful. And what you're describing there is I would put in the abuse category versus, true, because I think these things are valuable hunting tools.
Absolutely. Anybody not going to the field with a GPS unit today needs to go get one and take it to the field.
I don't know. Compasses and maps work just fine.
Yeah. Well,
even though you don't have one.
No, and you're right. But to be able to look up, like on cadastral, something like that, and oh, gee, I don't want to go this way because I'm going to go on private land. It's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're selling coordinates to a big animal, there's something that just it doesn't smell right.
No,
right. And a lot of this is just passing the smell test too. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And you got to ask, why would anybody do that?
Yeah.
Is it a monetary drive, or is it just because they can do it? I mean, it's
it takes the two. I tell you, one person it's the monetary drive, and the other person they want this gigantic animal on their wall without having to put in the effort.
There are certainly, there literally are sales pitches out there. It's on the internet with some of the guys who do this who are saying like, hey, we know you're busy and you don't have time to do your own scouting and you don't have, but you still want to get, and they will advertise. They still want to get the numbers, right?
Right.
And so now I will do all this for you. And all you have to do is show up during the season.
Now, in some ways, that's been happening since the dawn of time, right? Because you had
your Indian scouts or your Native American scouts, and I think
you hire outfitters, and people hire outfitters, and you're hiring them for their local knowledge and the fact that they've spent all this time in the summer locating animals, and they're going to guide you to these places.
So here's the argument that I would make where it's different. We regulate that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's not like it's not like you or I like that. This is something where this is and that's part of the challenge of technology. This is an unregulated industry now.
Mm-hmm.
These are individuals who are making additional cash flow doing this, but it's not like they've got a license with Game and Fish for their a website and to do these things. And
right.
It's
the outfitter's providing another service. Right?
Yeah, well, it's not the out.
No, but I'm saying. The example, you're right. What you're talking about is not an outfitter. What the analogy I was saying, just as a comparator for us to, as a straw man, right? Is the outfitter is providing other services as well,
which is
accommodations and transportation and all.
And
sorts
he's a
of
licensed
things,
professional.
Licensed professional. Yeah.
He's a licensed professional, and that's been going on since, like you said, since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
However, this non-regulated, which I think is where the states are getting crossways. What should we regulate? What should we not regulate? What should we regulate? And how do we regulate it? These are all questions that are being asked, and it's all being driven by technology.
Yeah. Well, it's not going to go away. I really appreciate that you guys are staying on the forefront of it and that you guys are willing to have intelligent conversations about it and to lead that pragmatic discussion. Your history is certainly there where people, if Boone and Crockett says this is legit and that isn't, people respect it. And so thank you guys for doing it.
Well, we appreciate it, and I appreciate the time that I had with you guys today. I think, probably the takeaway message is, think before you shoot, or something. Just remember that, there's a lot of eyeballs that are looking at the hunting community right now, and let's be responsible about when we go out there. It's about our craft, and
Absolutely.
not about killing an animal.
Yeah. And I appreciate you coming on and talking about this, and I wish we had another hour to keep diving into it. I know you have to go. I have to ask you one last question because it's a question we ask everybody that comes on this podcast. And so you probably don't even know you're getting hit blind by it. This is the Your Mountain podcast. We talk about issues relating to your land, wildlife, water, and we want to know. We like to know what a person's mountain is. What's that special place to you? What's your mountain? Right? What's that place to you that's so special that
you do not have to give coordinates?
No, you don't. In fact, maybe it's unethical to do that.
I don't know. So, me personally,
yeah. And it can be a philosophical, metaphorical, real. It can be anything. People run the gamut on this, but it's just
like where you find animals, or just where you want to be.
It's just whatever.
Whatever I say, whatever drives you, whatever that place that is meaningful to you.
I'll tell you the place is meaningful to me, and you guys are welcome to come up anytime you want, is the Theodore Roosevelt Memorial Ranch. It's a ranch that the club owns in the Rocky Mountain front. I spend every spare minute of time I can out there because it is such an inspirational place. You have every kind of ungulate, in the continental United States that wanders across this place. You've got, 800-pound grizzly bears. You've got wolves. You've got mountain lions. You've got everything's there. It's all about, looking at a vista of mountains and seeing all these interactions between domestic livestock and wildlife. And it's very, very inspirational. When I want to clear my head, when I need to get back to ground zero on something, that's where I go.
In Montana?
It's in Montana, north of Choteau, yep. Oh. Just right south of Glacier National Park.
Well, we have on the record now that we've been invited to come up there.
That's
exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's exciting. Calendars out.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Tony. I really appreciate you spending the time. Really appreciate it. And appreciate all you do for wildlife.
Well, you mentioned a giant. I don't know if I know enough to be dangerous, and that's about it, gentlemen. Sorry.
That's the problem. All of us know just enough to be dangerous. That's why we got to work together.
Humility is a great trait, too, but you don't need to be humble on this one.
Well, anytime I can, provide more information, I'm just a phone call away.
Yeah, we appreciate it, and we obviously we appreciate all of you listening. And until next time, remember that life is about experiences, so go have one.